Well, hello and welcome, and thank you for your interest in this documentary about Mensa of Northeastern New York that covers the time from 2011 back to 1963 when the group was established. This is segment 4 of the 2010 to 1963 part of the documentary. The documentary actually consists of 2 parts. The part we're going to look at now covers the time from October 2010 back to December 1963. And the other part covers the time from November 2010 through December 2011. And we'd invite you to look at that also. There are actually 7 segments in the part of the documentary that covers the time from October 2010 back to December 1963. Segment 1 includes the introduction and an overview. And in segments 2, 3, and 4, there's information about the various presidencies and the incumbents at the time and interviews of many of the incumbents. Segment 2 covers 2011 to 2006, Segment 3, 2006 to 1993, and Segment 4 that we're going to look at now covers the presidents and LocSecs from 1993 back to 1963. And Segment 5 has information about other positions in Mensa of Northeastern New York, in addition to the presidents. And also, Segment 5 includes some information about other noteworthy members of the group, both past and present. Segment 6 includes information about many of the events of the group and also the communications used in the group. Mostly the communications were newsletters until the digital media came available. There's also information about American Mensa and the Mensa Education and Research Foundation, just in case anyone is not totally familiar with them. Also, there are references in Segment 6. The references were used in the research and preparation of the documentation. Segment 7 includes the methodology that was used in research and preparation of the documentary. The author considers this very important because it shows the authenticity of the contents of the documentary. Also, Segment 7 includes acknowledgments to the many, many people who contributed either to the research or to the preparation, or both, of the documentary. It also focuses on the heritage of Mensa of Northeastern New York and includes the reflections by the author after having completed the research and documentation. There's also part of the documentary that covers the years from 2010 to 2011, and we invite you to look at some of the segments of that part also. So now let us begin with a welcome by President Rob Salkin.
Hi, my name is Rob Salkin. I'm the president of Mensa of Northeastern New York. Welcome to the first 46 of 48 years of the history of Mensa of Northeastern New York, as put together in a documentary form by Leo Kellogg. There's also a second part, which covers my term in office, beginning on November 1st, 2010. Enjoy and keep in touch.
The title of the lead position, that is the Chief Executive Officer of Mensa of Northeastern New York, from the present back to November 1, 1996, is and has been President. Prior to that, from October 31, 1996, back to December of 1963, when the group was established, the title of the position was LocSec, which is short for Local Secretary. At this point, I'm going to just read the listing of presidents and LocSecs, because after this we'll have an individual slide for each one of them. Rob Salkin began as president on November 1, 2010. Prior to that, Andrew Heffernan, Leo Kellogg, Judy Keating, Richard Rakowski, Ron Norris, Joe Manuel, Dick Pansel, and the title of the lead position changed from LocSec to president on November 1, 1996, the same day that Dick Pansel began as president. Prior to that, there was Katrina Lebrun, and prior to Katrina, there was Dar Novak, Peg Shambo, Dar Novak on his first term in office, Marty Berman, Roy Schneider. And it was while Roy was the LocSec that the name of the group was changed to Mensa of Northeastern New York from the previous name of Capital District Mensa. Prior to Roy, Dick Boone, Willard Hoyt, and Joe Manuel. And Joe started the group in 1963. Dar Novak served as LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York 2 different times. One time was from 1982 until 1993, 11 years. And the other time was from 1979 until 1980. Another 2 years for a total of 13 years. Dar has served longer as LocSec than any other person. And he served twice, which only one other person has done that, Joe Manuel. And each time that Dar served, he served for more than 1 year. And he held other positions also in Mensa of Northeastern New York. Dar has been a member of Mensa since June 1972, continuously. So this year, 2011, he's completed 39 years as a Mensan. With what he's done for Mensa of Northeastern New York, and as long as he's been a Mensan, there is no question that Dar Novak is a superstar of Mensa of Northeastern New York.
Hello, Dar Novak. Well, you were one of the presidents of Mensa of Northeastern New York. In fact, you were the president for the longest number of years of any president since the organization was started. And you became the president the first time about 1982, and you finished in 1993. How did that come about?
Well, in 1982, Marty Berman was the LocSec, and I had attended one of the meetings, and Marty advised me that he was being transferred to a different state, and they were looking for somebody to take over as LocSec. And he said, "Dar, you'd make a great LocSec." And I said, "Well, what do you have to do?" And he says, "It's a cinch. You can handle it. It's easy. You'll love it." And I said, "Well, sure. I'll have to win the election, though." And he said, "You don't have to worry too much about the election because you'll be the only one running for office." And it was downhill after that.
Dar, what were some of the kinds of events you had while you were the president?
Well, for several years, we would brainstorm and try and come up with ideas to keep the new members coming and recruit members and keep the old members happy. And with any organization, you can't please all of the people all the time, but you can please some of the people some of the time. So we had brunches were very successful. Games nights at people's homes were quite successful. We would have restaurant meetings that we would rotate around the greater Capital District. Those were very successful. One of the best regular functions that we had was a brunch at the Howard Johnson's in Latham. That went on for many years. We would also have a weeknight dinner at the Bishopsgate Pub in Malta for several years. That was very popular. We had joint meetings with other local groups, especially Vermont Mensa. And I've heard that in the last several years they've had joint meetings with Mid-Hudson, which is another adjacent group. So we tried a meeting in a cave. We went to Howe Caverns, and that was a successful meeting. We would have picnics. We had some canoeing, some bicycle riding, some hiking. We tried numerous different things, and they would become popular, and then interest would wane, and then we would come up with something else that would be popular for a while. Interest would wane. So these things would be like a lot of things. They would be cyclical.
Sounds like you had a lot of different kinds of events.
Yes, we did.
Oh, that was good. Was there a regular Mensa testing schedule at the time, or how did that happen?
You know, I'm really not too clear on that because I was never a proctor, but we did have several proctors, and they were good proctors. And as far as I know, we did a lot of testing in the Albany area, right down on Western Avenue. We had someone who was a teacher and had access to the school. I can't remember the name of it, but it was right off Western Avenue, and she held regular tests. And I would drive down from Hudson Falls and be there when the test was finished and talk to the testees and the prospective applicants and hand out Mensa brochures and our local newsletters, and I would save old Mensa bulletins, hand them some Mensa bulletins so they could see what the national publication was like, and answer any of their questions, invite them to come to our meetings while they were waiting for a reply, and especially if they did get a reply and the only reply they received was, "You're eligible, please join." And we would ask them to, come to our meetings and see if you liked us.
Well, Dar, you've seen a lot of changes in Mensa of Northeastern New York over the years. And what would you anticipate would be some of the good things that you would want to see in Mensa of Northeastern New York in the coming years?
Well, I've got to tell you, in the last few years I haven't been that active. I've had a lot of changes in my life, a recent marriage, some illness, but I'm pretty much steadied things out now. Got things pretty much under control, so I may be spending more time, attending some of the local events. I know that we've got a good crew in there now, some active people, and we've got a returning editor who's an ex-president and ex-treasurer, and I'm sure he's worn a lot of other hats, so he'll be a good influence for the group. I'd like to see, more of the generalized meetings where members can just get together and talk about things. That's basically one of the things that we used to do when I first got in, was just the getting together, the socialization of the members, and sometimes around food, sometimes around drink, sometimes around the outdoors, or other activities that people like. So if you can center it around some other activity that you can do when you're not talking and involved with the other members, that's a successful meeting.
Well, Dar, one of the things that that is noteworthy is that you're coming up on your 40th anniversary as a member of Mensa. That is in June of 2012. This is remarkable, and we congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Peg Shambo was the 7th LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York, and she joined American Mensa in 1980, became the editor of Mensa of Northeastern New York, and then later in 1980 began as LocSec and served until 1982. It was during her time that the typical meetings were such as the bunch, which met at the Sign of the Tree restaurant in what is now the Empire State Plaza in Albany. They also had dinner and conversation at Grimaldi's Italian restaurant in Colony, and business meetings
at her home to discuss the future plans of Mensa of Northeastern New York. Included in the April 1982 issue of the newsletter, while she was the LocSec, was a questionnaire to determine the interests of the members of Mensa of Northeastern New York, what kind of events they would like to have, what kind of special interest groups they'd like to join, and any suggestions, and of course, if they'd like to volunteer. It was while Peg was LocSec that the Mensa of Northeastern New York group had planned to have a regional gathering. And this regional gathering would have been the first regional gathering to be held solely by Mensa of Northeastern New York. It was scheduled for May 7, 8, and 9 in 1982, and it was to be held in Latham, and the arrangements were made for it. And of course, that required some deposits of money, and the name of that RG was going to be Saratoga Wear a Toga RG. And the what had happened was that Peg had gone to other RGs, and people had told her that they would attend. However, as the time approached for the RG, which was going to be held at the Holiday Inn in Latham, it turned out that not enough people registered in order to hold the RG, so it was canceled. The Mensa of Northeastern New York group did not have enough funds to pay for the commitment for the hotel, so American Mensa did have to come to its aid and pay off the obligation. And in Peg resigned at about the same time. In April of 1982, Peg resigned as LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York. In 1990, Peg joined British Mensa, and she rejoined American Mensa in 1997. And after that, she was at one point in Massachusetts and another point in Ohio, where she resides now as of 2011. She joined the Iowa-Illinois Mensa and was editor of their newsletter there beginning in 2001, and was the LocSec of the Iowa-Illinois Mensa Group from 2001 to 2005. And it was during 2001 and 2003 that she organized their first website, and she also organized a leadership development workshop for them in 2004.
We've given a complete description of Dar Novak in the narrative on the other slide, so I'll only give a quick summary here. Dar Novak has served 13 years as LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York. He served twice, and there's only one other person who has been LocSec twice, and that was Joe Manuel, who started the group. And Dar is the only person who has served multiple years each time he has served as LocSec. Dar has been a member of American Mensa since June 1972. So he's completed 39 years as a Mensan. Dar is certainly a superstar of Mensa of Northeastern New York. Marty Berman was the 5th LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York. He was in office from 1975 to 1978. And one of the interesting things that happened while he was the LocSec is his effort with respect to publicizing Mensa of Northeastern New York. There's a letter in the May issue in 1978 from the radio station WMHT-FM stating that that they would broadcast 5 times on March 18, 1978, that, quote, presentation of today's programming on WMHT-FM is made possible in part by a grant from Marty Berman, local secretary of Mensa of Northeastern New York, close quote. So Marty was very interested in promoting Mensa of Northeastern New York through the radio. After Marty finished serving as LocSec in December of 1978, he and his wife moved to Chicago, Illinois. And Marty is deceased now. His membership in American Mensa ended in the program year 1997 to 1998. Roy Schneider was the 4th LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York. He was in office from 1971 to 1974. He'd actually joined Mensa in the late 1960s, and he was very proud of it. He wore his Mensa pin on his lapel most of the time. Jim was very deep in math. He taught math and history also at the North Country Community College in Saranac Lake, and he had a master's in math, and he'd also studied for his PhD at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. So he had all his work done, but he just needed to write a dissertation. Unfortunately, in 1970, his house burned down, and all the data for his dissertation were lost. It was while Roy was the LocSec that the name of the group was changed to Mensa of Northeastern New York from its previous title of Capital District Mensa. Saranac Lake is a fair step from the Albany region, but Roy used to come for meetings to the Albany area, to the Albany region. The 3rd LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York was Herman Lafayette Dickman Boone. And Dick held the office from 1970 to 1971. Dick joined American Mensa in January 1967. And when he became the LocSec, his goals were to increase the membership of the group and also to increase the participation of the present members. The group was about 20 members when he became LocSec, and during the time he was there, it fluctuated a little bit higher in numbers. One meeting was held at his home in the hamlet of Quaker Street, which is located at the intersection of New York State Routes 7 and 395. Most of the events, he said, while he was the LocSec, were dinner meetings where people would get together and eat and talk. One of the staples of events of Mensa of Northeastern New York then, as well as now. Some of the places where they met were the Van Dyke in Schenectady, where the group also held meetings there for many years after that. It also met at the Bishop's Gate restaurant in Malta, at a restaurant called Someplace Else, which was located east of Schuylerville. And also they met in a community room of a bank on Western Avenue in Albany. Dick remembers that one of the events was a ride on the Hudson River in a 20-foot sloop that was owned by Willard Hoyt. As for the future, from now, 2011, Dick hopes that Moni will continue generally on the way it is now, and to enhance the participation and increase the participation by more members, and also to secure recognition of Mensa of Northeastern New York by the community. There is no doubt that Dick Boone is a great pioneer of Mensa of Northeastern New York.
Hello, Dickman Boone. You were the third LocSec of our Mensa Group, and became a Mensan in 1967 in January, and actually in Florida, and then you moved here, and from 1970 to 1972, you were the LocSec here. When you became the LocSec, what was your main goal for our Mensa Group?
Basically just to increase the membership and especially increase participation of the members.
And approximately how many members were there in the group at that time?
During the time I was LocSec, it pretty much fluctuated up and down between about 20 and 40.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the kinds of events that you had in the Mensa Group while you were the president?
Pretty much the only thing was monthly dinner meeting. And
were any other Mensa groups involved? Did you meet with any other Mensa groups while you were the president?
No, not really.
Mm-hmm. You've seen a lot of changes over the years in our Mensa Group, and changes of members and things that we do and whatnot. And what do you hope for that our group will be in the future?
I hope it'll pretty much continue the way it is. And like I say, my original goal is increase membership and increase member participation, and maybe a little more, get a little more recognition in the community.
Well, very good, Dickman Boone. We thank you very much for having been the president for the LocSec, the third LocSec of the group, and we appreciate your service, and we appreciate this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Willard Hoyt was the second LocSec of Mensa of Northeastern New York. He was in office from 1968 to 1970. Willard actually joined Mensa in August 1966, and he has continuously since then been a member of Mensa of Northeastern New York, and he has continuously been very active in the group. For many of these years, he has been a member of the executive committee. He's held several positions, and he still attends Mensa events almost every week. In addition to that, he's written an article for the monthly newsletter called Witzelzoek. He's written that on a monthly basis ever since sometime in the 1980s. The Witzelzoek is a collection of poems and jokes and humors. And one of the things that's special about it is that Willard writes them, creates them himself. Also, Willard is coordinator of a special interest group. This one is on eugenics. During the Korean War, Willard was a member of the United States Army, but separate from military service, Willard has resided in Europe for over 4 years in his life, and he's traveled to every major country outside of the then Iron Curtain, except Greece. And he's traveled also in 6 countries in Southeast Asia. Willard is well-traveled, and very frequently in the conversations at current Mensa events, he will comment about various aspects of the various countries. Willard is a real superstar of Mensa of Northeastern New York. You can tell that from his length of service, his activity in the group, and also from the testimony that has been mentioned by several other speakers in this multimedia presentation.
Hello, Willard Hoyt. You were the second president of Mensa of Northeastern New York. Well, what did you do while you were the president?
I made a few changes. I carried on from what Joe had done, but tried to increase the number of activities.
And did you have a newsletter at the time?
Yes, but it was just one sheet of paper that was mimeographed on my own mimeograph.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the kinds of events that you did have?
Well, we had been meeting at Bishop's Gate in Malta, and we continued these, but also I tried to bring in trying different types of activities like picnics.
I understand that you had a really successful event, something to do with flints. What was that about?
Yes, there was a field near the prison in Coxsackie where there were big stones of flint, and I scheduled that, and quite a few people brought their children because they could pick up the flint there.
Ah, that sounds like it was pretty lot of fun. Did you have a proctor and do some testing while you were the president?
Yes, a lawyer by the name of John MacArthur.
Mm-hmm. And did the National Mensa provide some assistance?
They started paying for the newsletter while I was in office, I believe.
Willard, you joined Mensa 45 years ago.
At least.
And you've been active ever since you joined.
Mm.
That's phenomenal. Well, we congratulate you for that. Now, you've also been writing for the newsletter for many years. Would you tell us about that?
Just when I was LocSec, at the bottom of the schedule, which was just the one page, I'd stick in one joke, and I continued that on when other people took my place.
Well, it's very interesting. We're glad you're doing that. And when we look to the future, you've been involved with Mensa Northeastern New York for a long time. What would you hope that Mensa of Northeastern New York would do in the future?
Well, we've increased in size so much that we are doing so much more than we ever did before, and now we have a full slate of people that have some job in running the chapter.
Very good. Well, we thank you, Willard, and we congratulate you for all the service you've given to Mensa of Northeastern New York.
Thank you.
Joe Manuel is, by any standard, Mr. Mensa of Northeastern New York. He is the one who actually started the Mensa Group in 1963. He gathered together the Mensans in the area, in the region, and then petitioned the American Mensa organization to establish the group. And he was the first leader. And at that time, the leader's position was called LocSec. Later on, the name of the lead position was changed to president, and it turned out that Joe also served as president. And that happened because in 1997, he was the vice president, and the president unexpectedly died. So Joe became the president, and he served in that capacity from January to October of 1998. He used to hold some Mensa meetings over at his place. He knew a lot about horse racing and betting, and he would host events, give instructions on racing and betting, and then they would move over to the racetrack. In 2001, Mensa of Northeastern New York had a brick to memorialize Joe, put in the Walk of the Minds of the Mensa Education and Research Foundation in Texas. So we thank Joe for starting the group and providing leadership from 1963 to 1968, and again in 1998. Well, this documentary about Mensa of Northeastern New York was prepared by Leo A. Kellogg, who was the first ever historian of Mensa of Northeastern New York. The documentary is copyrighted for and by Mensa of Northeastern New York, and all rights are reserved. Well, here's a listing of all the segments of the 2010 to 1963 part of the documentary about Mensa of Northeastern New York. When you're done looking at this summary, just go ahead and shut off your video. And we thank you again for your interest in this documentary about Mensa of Northeastern New York.